you're a regular viewer, you'll know this has been a long time coming. If you're new around here, hi, my name is Sam, and the story of how I ended up buying this Jaguar XE Project 8 starts 8 years ago. So let me take you back to 2017. I'd only been doing YouTube for around 18 months and I owned a stunning red Jaguar F-Type R, a car that I absolutely loved and is what started my infatuation with Jaguar in general. I caught wind of the fact that a special new Jaguar was on the way, so immediately I emailed my dealer and said, count me in, whatever it is, I want it. And a few months later, I was invited to a private customer preview of what we now know as the Project 8. At the time, we knew very little, apart from the fact it was going to be based on the XE and was supposedly going to be a track weapon. I was so excited and so on board, but at the end of a stunning presentation, which made the car sound like the best thing since sliced bread, they announced the price, which would be £150,000 plus options. Considering the F-Type Project 7, which was one of my other dream Jaguars, was £135,000 when new, and the most expensive XE at that time was around £45,000, I just couldn't stomach it, and I decided to turn down the opportunity and walk away from the Project 8 at the time. But I could never really shake it from my mind, and it always felt like a missed opportunity. Then in 2019, I finally got the chance to drive a Project 8. Jaguar lent me one of their cars for the week, and it blew my mind. I immediately said, it's like a four-door 911 GT3 with a V8. I was in love. Everywhere I went that week, I begged people to drive it. I was like, you just need to have a go. I remember going and doing the Collecting Cars podcast with Chris Harris and Ed Lovett, and I rocked up in this blue Project 8 with the big wing, and they were like, what even is that? And I was like, guys, you don't get it. Like, you need to have a go. Please ask Jag to borrow one. It was just, yeah. I knew in that moment, at some point in my life, I had to find a way to get hold of a Project 8, to buy one, to own one, to live with one. And I just started keeping my eye on the market, keeping an eye on values, seeing what cars came and went, and waiting for my moment. Now, YouTube tells me that lots of you also view Harry's Garage, as you should, because we all know Harry Metcalf is a living legend, and he, of course, also owns a Jaguar Project 8. In fact, I think he was somehow involved in the development, but I kind of forget the story entirely. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that maybe you've already seen lots of content on a Project 8. Maybe you already think you know everything there is to know about it. But just in case you don't, or perhaps you're still confused by it, I thought I'd give you a quick walk around and talk you through what it is, what it's all about, and how bonkers it is that it was actually ever created in the first place. I think the most important thing to understand about this car is it's really all about the engine. It only kind of came into existence because some mad people at Jaguar Special Vehicle Operations wanted to see how far they could push their 5-litre V8. Prior to this car, the most powerful version of that engine was in the F-Type Project 7, where it put out around 575 horsepower. Well, the engineers worked out that they could increase that a little further to a magical 600 horsepower number. But the question was, which car should they put that juicy engine into? Initially, they thought about another special F-Type, but then they realised that the XE could be a much more interesting option. This generation XE was heralded as having a great chassis and awesome handling. It represented a potentially better package if they could fit the engine in, because up until that point, the largest engine in the XE was a 6-cylinder. It had never been designed to fit the V8. But they did somehow manage to find a way to cram it in there. But then they realised they were going to need a whole load of cooling because, well, the 600 horsepower version of the 5-litre was already emitting a lot of heat, and now it was so tightly packed. So the front end was completely redesigned with a whole load of additional inlets and outlets, and even the usual plastic packaging you see on modern engines was discarded to aid with keeping that engine temperature down. Now, to be able to put 600 horsepower down the road, the engineers realised the car had to be all-wheel drive, and I can back them on that, because driving my rear-wheel drive 550 horsepower F-Type was terrifying most of the time. But because of how tightly packaged everything was, that meant they had to commit to only making left-hand drive examples of the P8. Apparently it was just too much work, too time-intensive, too cost-intensive to figure out a way to do both left-hand drive and right-hand drive examples. So at this point they'd worked out how to fit the engine in, how to keep it cool, and how to put the power down on the road, But then they realised they'd basically created a 200-mile-an-hour XE, so they needed a way to stop it. That meant fitting massive carbon ceramic brakes. But to fit the carbon ceramics, they needed bigger wheels, 20-inch wheels to be precise, and to house those, they had to move the front headlights forward. Essentially, this meant the front end of the car was completely redesigned to accommodate all these changes. So they ended up making all the body parts out of carbon fibre to help with weight, rigidity, heat, etc. So yeah, the front wings, the bonnet, the bumper, all of that is carbon fibre. But this was only the start. The track of the car was widened to help with handling. I think it's like 34 millimeters wider at the front and a massive like 75 millimeters at the back. I mean, it looks like a DTM car on the road or even a Liberty Walk when following it from behind. Because of this, the rear doors had to be custom made to include the curves of those massively extended rear arches. There are cutaways behind the front and rear wheels to aid with the airflow and reducing heat from the wheel arches. Then these extreme extended side sills which protrude so far from the underside of the car, they had to print a no step sign on them. And that's not a gimmick, it's because when you step out of the car, you naturally put your foot down where the sills are. You have to actively remember or remind your passengers to step over them. Around the rear, there's a functioning carbon fibre diffuser and of course a custom exhaust. And then most Project 8s got huge carbon fibre rear wings on the boot to aid with aero balance at top speed. By the time all this work had been done, the only parts that remained from a standard XE were the front doors and the roof. Everything else was unique or bespoke for the Project 8. Now the inside of the Project 8 is sort of far less bespoke. It's a little more standard XE in here, but that's no bad thing. I think a lot of you know I'm a huge fan of Jags from this era. I think the design and layout is spot on. It really hasn't aged. This car's from 2019. It all feels kind of bang up to date. Infotainment system is good. I've got Apple CarPlay. Sound system is good. Lovely steering wheel, great seating position. Yeah, I'm a fan. You could have a slightly more unique feeling interior in your Project 8 if you went for the optional track pack. Now this was seemingly hugely popular, which makes absolutely no sense to me, because what did the track pack do? Well, it replaced these quite comfortable and usable front seats with fixed carbon fibre bucket seats, and you lost the use of the rear seats because they put a roll cage back there. Now I get it, this thing set the Nürburgring lap record for a four-door saloon car when it came out. Maybe people were attracted by the idea of having the ultimate version, the fastest, most hardcore version, but why would you have a four-door saloon Jag with two seats? It's just weird. But most of the cars that come to the used market are track pack equipped. It's very strange. But yeah, if you don't have the roll cage and the buckets, the only other things that kind of let you know that this is a Project 8 is some slightly nice sort of Alcantara suede-like material, some carbon fibre and a few Project 8 badges. There's one very interesting badge which is right at the front of the dash actually. It says Jaguar SV 1 of 300. That is interesting because, well, Jaguar definitely set out to make 300 Project 8s, but the common consensus is that, well, they didn't sell 300. No one's gone along and counted them up or tracked VIN numbers, but word on the street is that only about 200 Project 8s were ever actually sold to customers. So along the way, Jaguar did a number of kind of incentives to try and get people's interests to sort of peak a little bit. They announced a one-make racing series using Project 8. I don't think anyone signed up for that. And then towards the end of production, they went, well, if people are turned off by the kind of big rear wing, the roll cage, the fixed bucket seats, maybe we should make a more usable and practical Project 8. So they came up with a touring variant. What was that? Well, essentially they just got rid of the rear wing and didn't allow you to spec the roll cage. Nothing else really changed. So yeah, it didn't really incentivize things. They ended up only making 15 factory tourings, and I feel like most of them were owned by Jaguar. I have been tracking tourings because for me, it's the one I always wanted. It's just a little bit more subtle on the street. Well, in fact, this one isn't because it's bright orange, and I kind of hate that. I've got to be honest. I think I'll probably wrap or colour PPF. Yeah, this car probably won't be that orange for that much longer. Anyway, moving past that, every touring that I've ever seen was like, oh, it used to be owned by the factory. I was like, interesting that. But anyway, long story short, yes, as you've worked out, this is an exceptionally rare 1 of 15 factory touring Project 8s. The funny thing is, if you had a 4-seat Project 8 with a rear wing, you could just take the rear wing out, go to a body shop and help them fill the holes. Didn't Harry Metcalf do that? So it's not that special, and I don't care because it doesn't matter the colour of the car, doesn't matter the colour of the wheels, doesn't matter if it's a touring or a wing car, as long as it's got 4 seats, it is a Project 8 underneath, and that means it drives, behaves and performs in this unbelievably manic way. so manic about it? Well, probably the 600 horsepower. This thing is a rocket ship, but it is the way that it behaves in the corners that just takes my breath away. But the amount of times I've looked down and seen the traction light being like, it's not that happy trying to compute all this power onto the road, but when it gets hooked up, you take off. But then you can stamp on these huge carbon ceramics, and they are confidence inspiring. Out here today, they're everything I need. And then yes, look at that, the front end, the grip, the turning, the feel through the steering. It is just, I mean, it's too good. Like, it's one of those road cars that is too good to be a road car because, well, you just end up driving a little bit too fast in the corners. You can manage your speed on the straights, but then you suddenly realize that you're taking corners so quickly. And then to have that engine which I adore and I love, roaring under your right foot. It's an engine I know how to control. I know how to get the emotion and the character out of it. It just all comes together. And the fact that you could do this with 3 passengers, or I will be doing this with my daughter, you've probably seen. I've got the car seat in here because yes, this will be a daily. And so we can go on adventures flat out. This is a car now for me for every occasion. I mean, look at how I'm stringing these corners together. It shouldn't be possible in a Jag. Now this is the bump. Ooh, I say bump, jump is what I meant. It's quite firm. I've got to be honest, I had forgotten how firm it is. Like, I watched my initial test drive video with the car from 2019, and I did talk about it being quite firm, but yeah. Thing is, you just have to get used to it. I've ended up on a really bad piece of tarmac for this segment of the video. The ride is not as bad as I'm making it out right now. Jaguar are very clever. They knew that whilst they might have some customers that would be interested in this thing, most of their customers would still want even a Project 8 to be usable. So actually they've got some very clever technology in the suspension. At the very top of the spring is a little sort of helper spring, which just helps with some of the on-road compliance, so that whilst you can turn everything up to 11, horrible phrase that, and go and attack the Nürburgring, you can also live with this car and not have your back broken. And that's the thing, it's a firm ride, but it is not a brittle ride. But yeah, I really need to get off this particular road because, yes. So, how did I end up buying this exact car? Well, a couple of years ago, March 2023 to be precise, Jaguar's own classic department, Jaguar Classic, advertised a nearly identical car for sale. It was a super rare touring variant, which I dreamed of being able to track down and buy, had the 4 seats, which was essential, and most intriguingly, it wasn't a delivery mileage example. In fact, the complete opposite. I think that car had like 30,000 miles on the clock at the time. So many of these Project 8s ended up at the back of collectors' warehouses just gathering dust. So when they come to the market, they're offered as these super low mileage examples, and people want all the money for them. But I knew my plan would be to kind of daily a Project 8, at least rack up some serious miles in one, so buying a super low mileage example was never going to be right for me. And whilst there were lots of things that were great about this car for sale at Jag Classic, we could just never agree on a deal. And stupidly, I once again decided to pass on the opportunity to buy a Project 8. But a couple of months ago, that exact car came back to the market, offered once again for sale with Jaguar. I thought, it's a sign. This is it. I need to go and buy that car. So I called them up and I was like, what's going on? And this time I was more determined. I'd had finance approved by Magnitude Finance. I tracked down the original owner and talked to them about it. I was going through the service history when someone snuck in and bought the car from under my nose. I was super deflated. And I was like, look, it's a sign. I just don't think it's ever meant to be for me and the Project 8. But then the phone rang and it was Jag Classic. They were like, yes, we have sold that car, but we think we found you another one. It's nearly an identical spec, and rather than having 35,000 miles on the clock, it's only got 6,000 miles. I was like, done, perfect, who do I pay? So, well, there is one caveat. Whilst it's got 6,000 miles on the clock, the car hasn't really moved for the last 4 or 5 years. Now, that can be a red flag when buying a used car, because you leave any car alone for that long, well, stuff just does start to go wrong. but I had just been through a very similar buying experience with my 360 Chan Stradale. I mean, that car hadn't moved for 10 years. Whilst it's been quite an upheaval and cost me a lot of money, we have got it back up and running, and dare I say it, better than ever before. So I said to Jag Classic, surely I could just send the car to you could do all the servicing, bring it up to date, any other maintenance that required, and then I'd be fine. And they're like, yeah, the cars are pretty easy to look after. So I was like, well, there we go. I am not going to turn down the opportunity to buy one of these cars for a third time. So I called up the seller, agreed a deal, got the finance approved, and finally, 8 years later, bought my dream daily driver, a Project 8. And luckily for me, the gamble kind of paid off because it really hasn't been that difficult to get it back up and running. I did send the car back to Jaguar Classic. I thought given the history and heritage of this specific car and the fact that all of the stamps in the service book were already from Jaguar themselves, it would be nice to continue that. And also I thought, well, how many other Jaguar service centres have worked on Project 8? Maybe it'd be best to send it back to people who really knew what they were doing. We decided the best thing to do was to get the car back up to date with servicing based on age rather than mileage. So it was given a full 72-month service, which is quite a big job, and it included spark plugs, brake lines, oil changes, etc. Now, I've got to be honest, there's a few things that were outstanding. I rushed to get the car back to film this video. It's actually going back to Jaguar Classic next week. There's a faulty emission sensor, which is just throwing up a weird engine light. It doesn't seem to be an issue, apart from the sensor might need to be replaced. And there are a few knocks and creaks that I just still want to get investigated before I start launching off on big road trips. The Project 8 itself actually had specifically designed Michelin Cup 2 tyres at launch, and my car was actually still wearing the original set, so I needed to replace them, but I actually decided to stick some Pilot Sport 4S's on. I'll be using this car year round and I need some wet weather security. I probably will stick some Cup 2s on it at some point, but just for now, it felt like the sort of more sensible choice. All of this came in at around $3,000, which is obviously a huge job, but should get me back on a level playing field. And moving forward, despite how unique and bespoke and special this car is, the maintenance is not dissimilar to any other 5-litre V8 Jaguar or Land Rover product, so not too overwhelming. Well, aside from the fact that I kind of found a car that I liked enough or felt good enough about to actually pull the trigger, why now, you might be asking? I've been banging on about how much I've loved the Panamera over the last year. You might be thinking, Sam, you've already got a GT3 and a Chan Stradale. Why do you need such an extreme daily driver? Well, multiple reasons. Firstly, I seemingly cannot go longer than 12 months without having this 5-litre V8 in my life in some form. I obviously had various F-types, I then had the F-Pace SVR on loan, and yeah, I need it in my life. But secondly, this very well could be the last proper, hardcore, sporty Jag. I know they made some special F-types after this, but this thing is a real behemoth of all Jaguar engineering. And to own that, to own the most powerful version of this engine that I love, to own such a unique, limited run Jag, for me in my life, it makes sense. It just makes sense. And whilst my daughter might have a bumpier ride to nursery, and whilst I might be paying a little bit more in fuel, I mean, you only live once, right? You only live once. So what next? Well, I've kind of talked about the fact that I don't love the spec. I've had to look past the spec because the car is the car. So I do think I'm going to be looking at doing a colour change, whether that's vinyl wrap or peelable paint. I'm not going to actually paint it because I just have spent all my money painting my Chan Stradale, so let's not repeat that misery. I want to change the wheels to silver. And aside from that, get ready to rock and roll. I will be using it regularly, but I want to do some adventures in it. I want to do some trips. I want to find some places to take it. It's a car that can just do it all. It's got a practical boot, it's got the space. And actually, my drive here to Wales, it was doing like 35, 36 mpg. I'm just so ecstatic to finally own one of these things. And if you look at my garage now, GT3, Chan Stradale, Project 8, I've done it. It's my holy trinity. Like, I'm done. I can retire. Like, for the eternity of this channel, those are the 3 cars that I've banged on about the most. And somehow, that's where I'm at. So, a huge thanks to all of you. I am eternally grateful that you give me these opportunities. And I promise, I'm going to change things up a bit now. Somebody made a comment on the podcast the other day, why don't you film with your own cars as much as you used to? And I was like, fair point. And so now that I've got these 3, I think it's only right to shift things a little bit. of course, the new car reviews and all those things are still coming, but I want to get back to doing proper adventures, proper experiences with my own cars, and maybe I need to do a track day shootout with my 3 track focus cars. Why do I own 3 track focus cars? I'm an idiot, but boy am I happy. So yeah, hopefully you understand this thing a little bit better. Hopefully you understand why I've ended up buying one. And yeah, you'll be seeing plenty more of this thing in the future. Project A, who would have thought it?